And this one sort of rocked my mind. How many people have heard that the stock market's doing well this year? Has anyone heard that the stock market's doing well? Only 2 people? Stock market's doing real well this year. All right, but what does real well mean? Okay, in a very good year, I'll say in a good stock market year, it will make 9%. See that first column? So you'll make 9%. See that first column where the arrow's going up? Okay, that 9%. But the stock market does not work like a bank account works. A bank account earns 9% this month, then 9% the next, then 9% the next. You get my picture? The stock market doesn't work that way. That 9%, 5%, see the next column? If you just take 10 random days out of the year, 5% of that 9% were made in those 10 days. So which days were those? Because those are the days you wanted to be in the market. And so if you were not in the stock market on one of those days, you didn't make that 5%. Okay, what we're talking about is risk. I'm trying to get you to see what risk is, okay? Because return's easy, but risk is harder to see. So 10 days a year, it made 5%. Okay, now the next column, excluding 20 days, your investment made nothing. So how many days in a year? 360 roughly, take out 20. So 340 days of the year, 0. That's how much you made in the stock market. On a good year that made 9% by the end of the year. So if you were in the 340 but you weren't in those 20, you didn't make nothing that year. Does that make sense? This is not trying to be depressing, okay? This is just trying to help you understand the stock market's a little tricky, okay? And so now, here's the worst thing. If you were out 30 of those days, you lost 3%. And if you were out of the top 40 days, you lost 5.9%. So being in the same year in the stock market, if you missed the right 40 days, you could be losing money. But if you were in the right days, you could be making money. Do you see how that works? So I'm trying to teach you risk, what that really means. So there's an inherent risk with which days you're in the market. So investment people will tell you never take your money out and then put it back in, because when you take it out, you don't know if you're going to miss one of those days. And when you put it back in, you don't know if you're going to another one of those bad days. Does that make sense? Because which days you're in and out can really mess you up. All right? Next slide. So that's risk in terms of days. Then there's risk in terms of years. Okay, come down to the bottom of that. These are a stack of years. But in the very middle, it says 0 to 10%. So that's how much money in those years the stock market made between 0 and 10%. And then to the column to the right, those years it made 10 to 20%. And going to the right again, so in 2012, the next column is 20 to 30%. So a 20 to 30% return is like crazy, okay? But go up to those years. 2009, 20 to 30%. And look at 1997 and 30 to 40% in 1997. I mean, that would have been a nice year to be in there. But again, in 1997, when it made 30 to 40%, it was only certain days it made that kind of huge jump. If you weren't in on those certain days, you didn't make that number. You had to begin at the beginning of the year, be in there during the entire year in order to make that return. Do you see that? And so which years you enter the market can be very risky. Does that make sense? Just too much graphs? Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, in the inverse, I didn't show you the bad years. You know, you didn't want to be in 2000, 1999, 2001, 2002. Those were bad years. Okay, you get in there, you throw your money in those years, it dropped. Okay. Okay, so now jump to the next one. Okay, and then remember I said there's a mutual fund for everything? Here's some different mutual funds. You see 2003 to 2007 at the top, those gold ones, it says emerging markets. Do you see those right there? What are those interest rates that it earned those years? Read some of those out. 56% in 1 year. Isn't that awesome? Wouldn't you like to have been in that year? What else? What's another number there? 25%. I mean, who wouldn't want to make 25% return? But here's the catch. So you could say, oh, well, I'm just going to buy an emerging markets fund, mutual fund, because that one was really good. But now look down in the bottom left-hand corner in years 1994 to 99. It was the worst performing fund. So you're feeling lucky. It's like, so they can go to be the top fund or they can be the bottom fund in any given year. So there's risk in knowing which funds to buy. Does that make sense? And so the stock market is tricky in terms of you got to be in the right days, you got to be in the right years, you got to be in the right funds. And so how in the world do you navigate that? Does that make sense? All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay. So let's just talk. I'm actually not ready for that slide. You want to? Yeah, just leave it there. Okay, so here we go with that question. So you have crazy years, crazy days, crazy funds, and now how in the world do I get started? So the way you get started in an investments is you start putting a little bit in every paycheck, the rest of your life. And then it's called income averaging. And when you average a little bit every paycheck, you'll get the highs, but you'll get the lows, and it will average out to these averages that we're planning on. Remember, we're planning on an 8% average on your savings sheet. So if you just are faithful in putting in every paycheck some amount when the stock market's high and when the stock market's low, it takes the risk out of it. But if you start to try to play games with it, to think that you can outguess it, most people don't win. Okay? Because there's too many probability odds against you in terms of being able to think that you know more than what you can do. However, people that put it in at each paycheck and put an automatic amount in every pay period, you will win over time. But then that gets into, remember that savings spreadsheet? I said there's short-term, mid-term, and long-term. You can't put in monies that you need short-term into the market because of what I just showed you. When you entered your money in short-term, if you put it in the stock market, you could have very well started putting it in on a bad year, in a bad day, in a bad fund. But even if you start in a bad day, bad fund, bad year, over 10 years it doesn't matter. That's the beauty of it. The stock market catches up. And so, yes, it would have been better if you would have bought cheaper, with a better fund and a better year. But over the course of 10 years, it mathematically just sort of makes up for itself. But if you don't have a long investment horizon, you shouldn't be in the stock market because the stock market is risky. Yeah, what?
So, okay, I would have to, because I'm just not smart enough to do this on my own, I don't feel, I would have to get a stockbroker. So how are the fees, what should you look for in a stockbroker?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that question, and you don't need a stockbroker. Okay, and so she's asking, how do you get started? We're going to, if you want to cheat, just because that's all your mind's on, another tab down there is how to get started. So, but in terms of just realizing, so even if you started tomorrow, and tomorrow the market was at a high, best day ever, and that's the day you bought, which you don't want to buy when it's high, you want to buy when it's low. And then it dropped, and you've stuck in your first payment, and then it dropped 200 points, and then dropped another, your next pay period dropped another 200 points, the next payment. And so it just went on this whole down, down, down. But you bought the next one cheaper, and you bought the next one cheaper, and you bought the next one cheaper. Then when it goes back up, you buy one, and it costs more, you buy one that costs more. It will average out till you'll be fine. So so even though there's risk, and that's real risk, the risk is only if you need the money now. If you don't need the money now, that risk goes away. Because that risk is a short-term risk and a mid-term risk. It is not a long-term risk. Does that make sense? So if you have over 10 years to plan for your kids' college or for your retirement, and you have time to plan, that risk, all that risk goes away. But I tell you that because you have to respect it if you're trying to put some monies right now into the market and you want them sort of soon, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now, 5 years from now. That's called short-term and mid-term investing. And then the market can be dangerous because it could go up to, or it could go back down. And if you needed that money and it went down, you're not going to have that money. But if you don't need it for 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 years, 20 years, it won't matter. Does that make sense?